You know what, Karina? I think we're ready to dive in because I think there's going to be a lot of people who have a lot of questions because there's a lot of talk about land development these
A
days.
lot, a lot. It's still a very great area.
It is. So I'm going to do a quick sort of intro warm up just to make sure everybody knows how this works in case you're new to my webinars. And then, Karina, we're going to dive in. I do have some great questions for you. And I want to make sure this webinar is really timely for where people are at. So I think I'd like to just, before I get into it, I'd like to ask, is there anyone who has done private lending on land developments in the last couple of years? Anyone who's done private lending on land developments in the last couple of years? Charlie says yes. Look at
Yeah.
all these yeses, yeses, yeses. Okay, we
Yeah.
got one no, but everybody else pretty much is yeses.
One no. Okay. A lot of yeses.
Yeah, two no's. Okay. So, how many people, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot here, how many people have either had to them personally or know someone who lent money on a land development deal and it's not going the way that it was supposed to? Maybe the borrower is in default, or maybe they've stopped paying interest. They haven't defaulted, yes, but they've stopped paying interest, or they're asking for extensions on the loans. Yep. Yep. Yeah, a lot of people are seeing that extensions. Absolutely. Okay. So this is part of what we want to make sure we cover. Me, it wasn't private lending, it was an equity partner, and it's delayed at least a year. Absolutely. So this is part of the reason why Karina is one of my, I would call her one of my real estate besties. We're part of a mastermind group together. I have so much respect for Karina, and we're talking about how challenging it has been in the last couple of years for land developers, because when the market's great, land developers are doing really well. And the low loan to values, the higher interest rates, the delays, and all the other changes that we've seen in the market pace have been really challenging for developers. So we really want to make sure that we are capturing that. So with that being said about why we're here and why Karina's here, we're going to dive in a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to do a quick intro into the world of land development and why we're here. So thank you to each and every one of you for signing up for the webinar today and for agreeing to spend your lunch hour, or perhaps you're watching afterwards. But I promise you this next hour with an absolute goddess in the real estate space is going to be a really valuable investment of your time in terms of acquiring new knowledge and information. Just in case you are not familiar with Zoom webinars, or maybe it's been a bit and you've forgotten how to use them, two quick things you want to make sure you consider when you are typing in the chat, and I want to make sure that everyone is engaged. Make sure you are clicking here on the drop down and you change to everyone. Otherwise, Karina and I are the only two people who will hear your words of wisdom and see your insightful and thought-provoking comments. And then the other piece is, because this is a webinar, I like to use the Q&A. We have allocated time at the end. So instead of posting questions in the ongoing chat, which we'll use to communicate with you, please do go to the tab at the bottom to the Q&A here and put your questions in for Karina. We will do our best to answer all of your questions before the end of the webinar, but I know Karina is super generous with her time, so if there's a couple of important ones that we don't get to, I'll try and grab the details from Karina and share them with you along with the recording afterwards. So quick welcome and introductions. I have a list of questions that I've prepared for Karina, so we're going to get through them as many as we possibly can. We'll do a Q&A and leave some time for you to ask your questions, and then I will be back again with final thoughts. For those of you who are new to my webinar series, my name is Elizabeth Kelly. I am an entrepreneur, an investor, and a business coach. I have 20 years of investing experience. I was formerly a top trainer for Rich Dad Canada, and I have helped thousands of investors across the country to build real estate portfolios and to start their own businesses to create financial freedom. And Karina and I met, I guess, years ago. We heard a lot about each other, And then
Mhm.
we officially met a couple of years ago. Carina is a superstar land developer. She has more than 14 years of experience. She specializes in transit-oriented projects, which if you are in the land development space, you know transit can be a huge thing to helping ensure there is demand and appetite for the product that you are creating. She also does large subdivisions. She is the founder of Creative Dev Ventures, and she leads purposeful land development initiatives. She has just at the beginning of this month launched her Land Development Academy, and she mentors both aspiring and experienced developers with a focus on creating environmentally respectful and prosperous communities. That's amazing, Carina. I love that, environmentally respectful. I feel like sometimes in the pursuit of money, other things might get left behind, like beneficial for the community and beneficial for the environment.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much for the intro.
You're most welcome. All right. So let me just grab my questions here. So let's talk a little bit because we know interest rates went quite high for a while. They've started to come back down. There's talk of another interest rate drop in December. So interest rates have been really challenging. We've seen inflation during COVID. We saw the cost of materials absolutely skyrocket. There was a lot of competition, and then all of a sudden the competition evaporated. There have been a ton of changes in the marketplace for investors. What strategies have you seen or are you utilizing right now that is actually working? Like what projects have you seen? What components need to be there? What is working? And then we'll talk a little bit about what stopped working.
That's a great one to start with, Elizabeth, because there's a lot of real estate strategies that don't work, especially right now. And so we have had to, even on our own, as part of CDV, Creative Dev Ventures, we have had to go outside of our Ottawa proper. You know, we were focused very much right in Ottawa, transit developments. And as everything has changed, like you said, the interest rates, the price of land has gone up, carrying properties have gone up, all of that, we have had to go into a bit of more larger scale, which is where the subdivisions have come in. And then of course outer, right, an hour to 2 hours outside of our core, so that we can make some really great projects. The numbers were great, and that's what you should be doing. What I think still kind of works, and I say kind of because that's still like with a grain of salt, is for people who maybe are already real estate investors, have a portfolio that they can work with, and figure out, go back to the drawing board with those pieces that they already own and see what is the potential there. Because buying property right now, especially 2020, everything went crazy. 2021, 2022, the prices just went up so high that my advice to investors that came to talk to me about that, it was more about, look at what you own now, because a lot of legislation has changed. Bill 23 came out right in 2021. The new laneway suites and the backyard suites, all of those changes now allow you to utilize what you own and maximize what you own much better. So that was for some time, and it still is today, my advice to a lot of people, so that you're not getting yourself in a place where you're going to acquire more. You're just looking at what you have now, because most of the time you can find something that you already own that you can maximize right now with all of these changes. But otherwise, a lot of markets do not work. So you may have to go a little bit bigger in terms of scale of project, so that the numbers work. Because if you're buying, for example, an interior lot on a great street, but you can only get a fourplex out of that, or an eightplex, it might not work, right? Especially with the price of land. So thinking about what you can do with what you have now, or you really gotta learn how to underwrite is my thing. Is, I know we talked about this a little bit on our IG live the other day, but underwriting land development deals is very different than underwriting any other kind of strategy.
Oh, Okay, so there was a ton there that I want to unpack. One of the things I want to highlight is what you're saying is to really go back to the fundamentals. So it's making sure you have multiple exit strategies. Don't buy a little piece of property and have there only be one use or one plan for it, because that may not come to fruition and you need to be ready to scale in order to make sense. And when you think about it in the context of like multifamily buildings, it's really hard to make the numbers work on 6 and 8 and 10 unit buildings. If you go to 20 units, the numbers are much more appealing and attractive.
Exactly.
So that part makes sense. Another fundamental it sounds like you're talking about is making money in the buy. So making sure that you are not paying top dollar and competing and overbidding on a piece of property to buy, because you need to make sure that you have that equity there to protect you based on whatever could happen in the market in the next few years. And then learn your numbers, plan for the worst, but hope for the best. Does that sound like that kind of recaptures?
Exactly. Oh my God, I couldn't have said it any better. Elizabeth, you were great.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit. Let's talk about the numbers. How are the numbers for land development different than the numbers that you would run if you were investing in another strategy? And I want to look at this from the perspective of both people who are land developers or are looking at becoming land developers, but also from the underwriting perspective of prospective lenders. Because we can see there's a lot of people in the room today who have invested in land development. And for some people, unfortunately, it's not going exactly the way they had anticipated.
Yeah. So in land development, we look at land very different, right? If you're in apartment buildings or maybe you're flipping properties, you're looking at land at the property very different. We look at two different things. We look at the property itself, what is existing there, just like any other real estate investor would, because ideally, I really suggest for a lot of us, and I did this for many years. I bought a property that had development potential, but had a property on it, whatever that might be, a duplex, a triplex, maybe whatever it is, right? Maybe it was an old rundown bungalow, whatever it is, but there's a property there so that you're getting into the deal more traditionally, like as an investor. And ideally, the property has some revenue that can bring, or you're doing some renovations to increase that revenue. So having something there, I get too many people that come and ask me, hey, Carina, where's the best place to buy land? And I really suggest do not buy land, at least not for your very first one, because land is very hard to carry. It's very difficult to carry. So if you as a lender, you're going in with lending money, you want to ask how much liquid capital do you have to carry this land? If you see a deal that they're coming to you because it has great development potential, but it's just pure land, they're going to have some deep pockets to carry that land. You have to put at least 50% down, maybe 55, maybe 60% down just to buy it. And then you have to carry it because there's no income coming into that property. That's issue number one. Like that's something you need to be heightened aware of, because there's nothing carrying this property. So all of the money that you would have to be, as a developer, you have to be cash heavy. But when you're buying land, double that, because that is a lot to carry also on top of it. That's why I really suggest buy a property with development potential. My rule number one is buy a property for what it is. So if it is that little bungalow close to transit or in a great location, awesome. Do not overpay because it has the development potential. Because like you said, Elizabeth, it might not happen, right? You don't know. Nothing is ever set in stone. Now, mind you, of course, we have a lot of due diligence checks that we go through to make sure, and we want to make sure that we have multiple exits. So when you're looking at a deal, you want to have the deal show you, number one, how you're going to be exited. Of course, you want to see the end goal of that project, but then you also want to know, what if this doesn't happen? What is plan B, or what is exit B, and what is exit C? I have a rule of thumb, and that is you should have at least 3 viable exit strategies out of each project. And that way you see how the plan changes a little bit, right? It's has some factor of de-risking the project. So a lot of people will ask me, well, if the city doesn't approve the project, does that mean you just lost everything? No, that does not mean you've lost everything. Okay, so just so you guys know, obviously there is a lot of work that has been done to get to a point where the city has come and said no, but at that point we will pivot, right? So this is where the experience level comes in, right? So as you're looking at a potential deal and you're looking to invest in it or become a partner into it, you want to see that the operator or the GP, I guess in this scenario, the developer has the right team and has the experience to know when do we need to pivot at some point. Ideally, you know, they have the level of experience where they're not getting to the end and they're getting a no. We know pretty well throughout the entire process, and this should be communicated, right? This all of this work and everything that happens throughout the year or 2 or 3, whatever it takes, this kind of information should be communicated to you throughout the project to say, this is where we are, this is where we're pivoting, we've learned this. So as we're going, we have a really good sense as to whether we think we're going to get to a yes at the end, you know? And that's what we do. We'll pivot, we'll make some changes. We've done it ourselves quite a bit, right? This is just how it is, especially in the last 2 years. A lot of things have changed. So you do have to pivot. And I have not yet seen a development deal that has just completely said no and it breaks apart. That doesn't happen. You have a lot of work and a lot of ways to change the design and change what you're doing so that you get to a yes. You would never just let it go and leave it there. But what I think happens to a lot of these deals is that because they have not been underwritten correctly from the beginning, they have not looked at where they're going to the end. When they get to a point where we might not get this approved right now, they've run out of money or they've run out of time with their investors. And so do you see how it can all accumulate? I don't think it's because the project itself is a failure, because you can't. There would always be something that you can do to fix it. It's more on the side of the timing and the caring of the property and investors not being communicated with. It's all of those other factors that when you get to the end, it feels like, oh my gosh, we are at we might have some issues here. You know, so all of these things, Elizabeth, are things that someone who is a really great operator, somebody who has the experience, who is taking on projects that they can absorb, will never get to that point. So I'm hoping that some of these people that said no and I need an extension, I love the one that needs an extension. I think that at least is something, right? You need an extension because they're doing something to pivot or to change. It's not a no at that point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think one of the biggest challenges facing land developers is working with, the municipalities, the levels of government, the powers that be. And one of the things that I've noticed about you that I think makes you quite different from a lot of other people is, based on our conversations, it looks to me like you are building relationships with municipalities before you're even putting in offers on land. You work to have an understanding of what it is that a municipality wants and needs, so that when you come forward with your proposal, they're absolutely thrilled and they're totally on board. They're not blocking you and saying, no, you can't do this, or no, you can't do that. They're motivated to work with you because you understand what their needs are. For example, some of the smaller municipalities, they really need more housing available to be able to grow. So to have Carina and her team of experienced developers come in, buy, because you have one piece of property, an enormous, like hundreds of acres under contract. And the municipality literally can't wait to have you break ground because they want the product that you're providing. Would you say that's another thing that land developers need to be really cognizant about doing, is really building those relationships even before, they come in with offers and the other pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's one of our advantages as developers. If you're, let's say, I go back to the apartment building because I know a lot of people invest in apartments. But when you're in an apartment building, maybe you're going in different markets or different locations, different neighborhoods. Whereas when you're in development, usually you end up developing within the same areas. And what that allows you to do is create the deep level of relationships that you just mentioned, Elizabeth. And that's what we do as developers, because it's so heavy on the approval side. And of course, having others see the vision when there's nothing there, right? As a developer, you're a visionary, you're looking at things when it's a blank canvas. So being able to communicate that, creating those deeper level relationships, the amount of due diligence work that we do upfront is massive. It is the largest, the acquisition and the planning side is the largest amount of weight that we have to do on any project. And the rest kind of flows after that. And so I see a lot of people say, holy geez, it's a significant level of effort. It is. It definitely is, but it's worth it, because then you get to a point where you gain these relationships and partnerships. I want to add the partnership aspect to it because that's huge. I think in anything, any kind of space that you're in, partnerships is very important. And so that's what's really going to help get the traction that you need. You want the stickiness of the project. You want to go out and talk to the community and understand where what they need and where are their mindset and what do they want. So all of this heavy lifting up front is going to pay off later on, because then you gain the relationships within the community. And that's what you should be doing. And as an operator or anybody investing in an operator, you want to make sure that they are very much transparent and have a lot of communication plans around that, because that is absolutely essential. I have seen people that will go to a community engagement and have had no communication with the community. And then they're like surprised that the community comes out and is not very friendly about it. And I'm like, well, what did you expect? Because you need to communicate. That is everything that we do, is communication. So it really works out really well, of course, where you find locations that need it, that want to work with you. We've been very blessed that we have a lot of great partners that come in with us and move forward with us on the next projects. And that's what's really about. It's the long-term game. We're not short-term people. Like if you're in development and you want to do it really well, just know you got to think of everything in the long-term game, and not for just today. What do I need to get done today? What do I need to raise today? This is the long-term game. So if you think of it like that, as the whole, everything that you're doing every single day, it has to be that. Sometimes, Elizabeth, I call myself a little farmer. So I always say to the team, we're little farmers, because we're just going out and we're planting seeds. We're planting seeds. We're planting seeds. And eventually those seeds flourish. They go, and that's what's really going to get you there, get you to this place.
I love that. That's such a great idea. And that visual is so powerful too, of you literally going out there and sowing seeds in different communities and with different stakeholders and shareholders. Do you find that it's easier to do land development in smaller communities than bigger ones? Like, I would imagine Toronto and Ottawa, they're not super flexible. If you come to them with a project and, they're not thrilled about some aspect of it, it's much easier for them to say no than it is in a smaller municipality, I would think.
That has been my experience for sure. I think the Ottawa and Toronto market have just gotten absolutely insane, and it's very hard. So it's almost like two different worlds, at least for now in my experience. It's like in the metropolitan, the cores, I feel like development or developers, we get this kind of looked at as like we're not here to be friends with you in a sense.
Right.
Whereas we've gone out an hour or two outside of our core, and the reception that we have received is absolutely phenomenal. It's been amazing. Not to say that it's all perfect, but it has been warmer and cozier feeling from them. Now, with that said, I will say that there's also the opposite side of a different factor, which is in the smaller municipalities, they don't have the kind of employee force as they have here
Mhm.
in the cities.
Mhm.
So we have had to deal with something, in the last 3 or 4 years that we've never had to deal with before in the last previous 10, which is these smaller municipalities they might not even have a planner that works internally. They might not even have an engineer. We had a municipality we were working with, and the entire group collapsed. And so they had to go back out and rehire, and that rehiring took 6 or 8 months to even happen. So our project was completely just stopped and just sitting at a desk, a vacant desk, because
My
there was
gosh.
no one really to go over it. So there is those other kinds of factors. There's also, of course, capacity issues in terms of servicing, so water and sewer. In the cities, not to say that there's an unlimited supply, but when you're dealing with infill kind of developments, you're not really too worried so much about that. You go through that as part of the process. You're making sure in the due diligence that there's enough capacity there for the project. More than likely there is, or you may have to pay into something, but you're not looking at it in the level that we are in more smaller municipalities where they literally do not have the capacity. So we have to always consider those things. We went into one municipality, which was 45 minutes outside of Ottawa. They loved it, absolutely loved our project. We had everything. And when we got to the due diligence part of servicing, they were like, we're actually out of services. So could you wait 2 years before you even consider moving on this project? And we're like, no, we're going to move on to the next. At that point, there's no way I can say to an investor, come with me and we're just going to sit on this for 2 years and do absolutely nothing, right? So those are the kinds of things that there's pros and cons in all of those aspects, of course.
Mhm.
So, but we have received, generally speaking, a much warmer, cozier reception from more smaller municipalities.
Interesting. Interesting. So let's talk for a little bit then about what you just brought up, which is how do you know when it's time to walk away? Because I find real estate investors, and type in the chat and tell me if you've experienced this, where you feel this need, you feel compelled to go ahead with a deal, whatever it is that you're looking at, because you put so much time and energy and maybe even money and due diligence in. Has anybody else felt like that? It's almost like this FOMO thing, right? Where you're like, well, I've done this, I've invested this, maybe I just am missing this piece. But how do you know when it's time to say, no, you know what? I'm not going to wait those 2 years. I'm not going to, hang around here and hope that this turns out. It's time to cut my losses and move on. How do you make that decision or that call for your
Uh,
projects?
that's the exact reason why we spend so much time in our due diligence process, which is upfront. So
Mhm.
that's why I say that the acquisition and the planning side of things is huge amount of effort, because you want to know whether you're going to move forward or you're not going to move forward. And the one thing that you don't want to do is get so enamored with a project, which I'm one that does that. Believe me, I get so excited about certain projects, and I only do projects that excite me. Like I will know within an hour or two if this project excites me or not. And if I don't feel excited, I won't even spend the energy or effort into even looking or doing any kind of due diligence on it. But so I'm the first to feel that way about certain projects. But it really all comes down to trying to uncover as many unknowns as possible. That's kind of the game of what we do.
Like
Okay. So
that.
there's a ton of unknowns there's a ton of assumptions that we make right at the beginning. And as you're going through your due diligence, and due diligence is like this much, I have to increase my screen here just to show. It's like a lot of due diligence that we have to go through up front. And as you're learning every single one, we're underwriting it with the new knowledge. Okay, we've found this other out, or maybe, we have to bring the servicing, 1 kilometer, whatever it might be, right? From here, how does that look like? And then we're underwriting and underwriting and underwriting. So every single time you uncover an unknown, you're re-looking at the numbers and seeing, does it make sense? Does it make sense? Does it make sense? And you're going to get to a point, before removing conditions, ideally, where you are determining, am I moving forward on this or am I not? And it's the level of risk that you have to decide at that point. Am I willing to take this level of risk? So it really becomes actually pretty easy, Elizabeth, even though easy in the sense of saying yes or no, even though, yes, you're right. We've spent, oh my goodness, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 just in due diligence alone to eventually say no to a project, and it does happen. Of course, I'm saying this with larger scale developments. I'm not really necessarily talking about infill right now, but as the projects get larger and as they get more complex, the level of due diligence that happens is larger. And so you're spending a lot of money. But I always say I'd rather lose that $50,000 to $60,000 instead of losing $60 million on a project. So that's how I take it. And every single time we're learning, we're gaining more intel, we're getting better at what we do. So to me, it's not a failure, but I do understand that some people might not have the stomach for that. That's why we say development is not for the faint of heart. You do have to have some level of stomach for it. But as you're going through it, you learn so much, and you want to do that heavy level of due diligence up front so that you don't get in trouble later. And for me, that's the exciting part of it. I love, like, it's coming up with the vision, it's coming up with the perfect way to phase it out, working with the community. Like, that for me is the most exciting part of it. And the rest, just figuring out the numbers and what is working, what's not working, that is simple math. It's simple math. If the numbers do not work, you say no, you move on to the next one, regardless of how beautiful that property may have been. That's just what you have to do. There's always others, always others.
Absolutely. And I think it sounds like land development is a lot like, I always talk to my coaching clients about real estate is a bit like dating, right? Where you have this idea of what a project could look like. You have this vision of, this is what I'm looking for. This is who I want to be with. And the reality is you're probably going to date quite a few people before you find like the one person that you want to settle down with. You kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. So it sounds like due diligence on land development is much like due diligence on multifamily buildings, where your job is to uncover potential issues, potential risks, potential pitfalls. And then at the end, you have to step back and really make a determination about whether the potential is there that you saw in the beginning when everything was all roses and hearts and sunshine, and say, this makes sense for me to move forward, or I have to be realistic. We do have a couple of good questions. I'm going to ask you, ladies, if you don't mind, throw the questions into the Q&A, because I want to make sure that we don't lose them and we get the opportunity to kind of circle back. And actually, you know what? Maybe we'll just quickly answer them right now. Carina, we have a question about how much would you normally spend on due diligence? And then how long is your due diligence period usually? Those two kind of go together.
That's a hard one to answer because every single project is different by scale, by type. So there is no hard percentage that I can give you on how much you would spend on due diligence. If it's an infill project, at smaller scale, you could be maybe looking at $10,000. You want to do your ESAs, your environmentals, making sure that there's no contamination on that property. Whereas if you're doing a subdivision, like I said, you could be looking at 70 to 100,000 before you decide, am I going to, in terms of timing, you know, for a smaller infill, I've had it tied down conditionally for 8 to 10 months even. And the same for a subdivision. I've had it tied up in terms of my conditional period for 8 to 10 months, maybe even longer. So that's why, you know, it's so different than just buying a property. So it just really depends on the scale, Janelle, I think it was, that asked the question, and they all differ differently. It's very difficult to say, but the costs you do not recuperate, no. If you don't move forward on that project, you have definitely lost those funds. But like I said, I think it's all knowledge, and it's all part of what we do.
I think there's an easier and a hard way to do it. You know, a lot of times investors, they want to buy, you know, the 50 unit building. It's usually easier to start with buying a 5 unit building and sort of get your feet underneath you, learn some of the steps, learn some of the due diligence, and then you grow your scale. And it sounds like land development is exactly the same thing. You know, buy an infill, you know, tear down a single family, build a fourplex, you know, do some of that stuff first before you go, I want to be a land developer and I'm going to start with this massive subdivision with 150 homes.
Exactly. Start small. That's how I started. I didn't start with huge projects. I started with a eightplex, you know. So I started with that, transit oriented. It was, you could throw a rock to transit. It was great location. Did that, you know, and then you kind of work your way up to it. You don't have to go like absolutely huge. And there's many markets, Elizabeth, like the ones that are 1 hour to 2 hours outside of my core, that have become way more profitable to do the eightplex or the 10plex than it could ever be here in Ottawa. So I have a lot of developer friends, and us, including us, we're out there, and those numbers work amazing out there, and they need the housing anyways, and the municipalities are great to work with. So it's all about, like, you know, figuring out the level of comfort that you have, the level of risk that you're okay with taking on. That's the beauty about development, is you can do it small, you can do it medium, you can do it large, you could do it whatever that you want. And each single one needs to have multiple exits. It doesn't matter how small it is, you have to have multiple exits, whether you're doing it small or you're doing it large.
Love that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the market right now. So for the last however long, there are a lot of people who are pushing this idea of OPM. And you don't need your own money to invest in real estate. You can borrow money from everybody else, and then you can get your deals done and you're going to make money. And from what I've heard from you, there are situations where you could lose money. So you might never do a deal and lose money on the due diligence. So let's talk a little bit about how that has kind of worked and what's happened in the land development space, because we have people who are being told, borrow money, you don't need to have any of your own money, get into land development. And then we have projects that the loan to value, the completed valuations are coming in low. We've got delays of 1 to 2 years into project completion. We've got really high interest rates. And it's all kind of come together into this perfect storm where developers are really struggling. Where have you seen developers making mistakes, or what could or should they be doing to ward off some of these challenges, in addition to coming into a deal with at least some of their own money? Because I don't like to hear that money's been lost and the active partner has no money in the deal, so they haven't lost any money. That hurts my heart a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you, Elizabeth. So we talked about having the plan. We talked a lot right already about the plan, like due diligence, making sure there's a lot of exits and all that. Where I think this goes now to your question, Elizabeth, is at the acquisition side of things. And that is figuring out, how do you capital stack your project? So if you haven't heard of capital stacking, just imagine how I'm going to put together all the money to make this project happen, from the acquisition to the whole entire entitlement process through to completion, right? So how do you capital stack that? And that's the big question, I think, right? Because a lot of people are like, well, I'm just gonna use OPM. I'm going to just bring people into my deal and I'm gonna make it happen with none of my own money. I think to some level, like that's normal. It even still happens today. Like big corporations still do this today. They use REITs, they put together mutual funds, and that is the most common strategy. They're actually doing the same, Elizabeth. Even these larger corporations that have been in the business for multiple decades doing this, they still do this today. But what I think is missing in the whole industry, or what's being taught, is it's not about using OPM to just buy the property and put it all together. That's not what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to be doing is you're supposed to be finding the right way to capital stack your project. Maybe that's a little bit of vendor take back, because vendor take back is huge in our land development world. It's very common. In fact, most larger corporations, that's what they do. They partner with landowners. They're not even coming in with the money to buy the land. Okay, so it may require some of that VTB, vendor take back. Maybe you are bringing a regular traditional mortgage as a first, but then for the rest, you're going to bring in some great partners. And that's the big difference between saying, I'm just going to bring OPM. I'm going to bring money partners, or money investors, I should say, to fund my deal. The way that I see it is you're a partner to me. When you're coming in to my project, I don't think of you as my lender or you're my capital, whatever, investor. You are a partner to CDV, to what we are doing. And ideally, you're a partner that loves this project just as much as I do. You see the vision of it. You are part of it with me. That's the difference between when you say, I'm going to use OPM or the other. And how does that differ? Obviously, from the emotional standpoint, people are more vested into your project and you as a person, as an individual. But second, they are in it because they're coming in as an equity. Ideally, equity is the best. I see too many people coming in with debt, loan, or they're bringing notes, promissory notes, prom notes, right? So you're bringing prom notes in and you're bringing money. You don't even care what the investors time frame, or what they feel like. Do they like your project? A lot of people care too much, or they're so in a rush to put a deal together that they don't even consider how they're going to capital stack it properly so that it allows them to do it successfully right through to the end. Let me tell you, bringing in capital from investors is just as important as them liking your project as you liking them. This has to be a two-way street. It's not just, let me just grab and put it out there. I'm going to say 12%. I'm going to give you your money back in 2 years or whatever. There's so much more to that. And I think that's the part that's not being taught. Personally, I don't think that bringing in money is a bad thing. Money is everywhere. We need to bring money to move things forward. I understand that. But when you look at it in a very different perspective, and you're really bringing the right partners into the deal with you, that's a whole game changer, Elizabeth. It's a whole different thing. So
you're so right, Carina. I love that.
Exactly right. It's just having that level of responsibility and really caring for people and who they are. It's going to take you a long way, guys. Like, you have to build we're going back to relationships. You have to build these relationships with individuals. They're not just people that want to give money. That's not where, if your mind is there, don't even bother doing it, in my opinion. That shouldn't be your thing. So all that to say is that if you stack it properly, your financing, the way that you're going to complete your entitlements, the way that you're going to exit, and bringing people that love your projects just as much as you do, that is a whole different game, and it's just going to make it so much better for you in the future as whatever it is that you're doing in your development project, and it's going to make it successful for you and for everybody else. So think of it this way. I have seen, Elizabeth, somebody bring just anybody into their deal, who has money, like, I'm going to bring them in. That one person that hates what you're not, it just turns bad, like it's not going well. That one person can literally just make your project like not successful. That one person could literally tear everything apart in your deal by having that one individual that is not happy. So why not do it properly from the beginning? I think, and what I'm really trying to say is responsibly, right, is what we're talking about here. It's a big difference.
I completely agree with you. I would say I'm probably approaching 50 partners over my time as an investor, and we've definitely used partnerships and private lenders to help build our portfolio. But I've learned so much, and now I find I'm so picky. So 20 years later, I have a mortgage on one of my properties that I need to replace. My husband's cousins want to leave, and they just retired, and I'm looking for, $200,000, not a huge amount of money. I'm just looking for that to be able to replace them. And people are like, "Oh, why don't you just post? Why don't you just ask?" And I'm like, because I would rather hand pick my next lender, because I know what I'm like as a borrower. I want to have that relationship. I want to be able to communicate. I want to know that I can trust that they're not going to come and after 3 months go, "I changed my mind. There's some shiny object over there that's going to pay me more than what you're offering. So I'm going to pull my money and I'm going to take it over there." Like, there has to be this relationship built on trust and built on communication that both parties can make it work. And I love that you look at that. I look at people's money too. My responsibility is to their money before it's to my own. My
Mm.
responsibility is to make sure they get paid back and they are made whole before I am. And I don't think that it's taught, as you said very well out there, the tremendous responsibility that comes with stewarding other people's money.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree
I
with
love
you.
that. Somehow we have flown through almost an hour. So I want to get to the Q&A, but I suspect some people might have to jump at the top of the hour. So what I think I'd like to do is we'll quickly do the wrap up, and then we're going to circle back, and there's a bunch of questions in here, and we're going to try and get through all of them. So they might be rapid fire. But
Okay.
Carina, you have a very exciting announcement to share with us. So do you
Yeah.
want to tell everyone?
Oh, well, thank you for asking, Elizabeth. We just launched our Land Development Academy. We have this is actually my third version of this entire project, and I'm super excited. This is by far my most comprehensive land development accelerator, all packaged up in one amazing product. So we have it now, and we're actually going to be doing a webinar. So November 20th. And I think Elizabeth has, oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have a webinar coming up November 20th, where we're going to talk about a live case study. We're going to go through what development looks like and kind of give you guys a peek in to what we teach, or what I teach in the Land Development Accelerator. So I'm really excited because this has been a project that has taken me some while to put together, and I'm so happy with the way it's turned out. So I hope you guys love it just as much as I do, and come join me on November 20th. And we'll have another amazing conversation just like this one, where I'm going to take you through, thank you, Sib, on a development project so you can have a peek inside. Looking forward
I
to that.
love that. And you have so much integrity, Carina. I have so much respect for you, and I've seen how hard you've worked to bring your vision for the academy to into existence. So congratulations on that. We're really happy for you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's dive into some of the questions here. So Ida said, my mortgage broker suggested we forget about CMHC. They told us to use a mortgage investment corp or a MIC instead, higher interest rate, but less restrictions, and it's much faster to accessing the capital. What are your thoughts? That is a fantastic question, Ida.
I would find another broker, Ida. Okay, just so you know, everybody has an opinion, right? So I can give you my opinion, Elizabeth can give you her opinion. There are some really great products with CMHC. I have a lot of students that are using CMHC. Um, I still go for CMHC first and foremost in any of my development construction deals. And I don't know if this is a construction deal, Ida, or if this is maybe an existing building that you're looking to buy. I'm not quite sure what it is, but um, I just I just know there's a lot of other people out there that can probably help you better than this broker. And MICs are really expensive, and they come with a ton of terms, a ton of terms that may not benefit you. So the same as what we were talking about, Ida, like when you capital stack and you bring the right people, it's not just think outside the box, right? You might not, I'm not, again, I don't know what this deal is that you're looking at, so it's hard for me to answer, but just think about what ways could I capital stack this? Is there some way to put maybe a little bit of MIC money, because that's very expensive money, and then a little bit of some other partner equity or capital that you can put in yourself, or maybe a capital partner that's going to come in with you on the deal. So setting yourself up for success from the beginning is super important. So really trying to figure out what is the cheapest way you can acquire that property without over leveraging yourself is key when you're doing any kind of acquisition.
Love that. Love that. Okay. And Amy had said, how do you approach getting a subject removal period that is long enough to conduct all your due diligence? For example, negotiating for 8 to 10 months. She's found that sellers are not willing to wait that long.
And they might not, and it's quite common, especially if they don't know that you're looking to develop that land. Okay, so if they're thinking, I'm just selling this little bungalow and buy it for what it is, which is what you should be doing, obviously you might not have the amount of due diligence period that we would like to have. So sometimes what we end up doing is we say, okay, like we try to get as much as we possibly can, knowing that we're going to ask for more time later. And sometimes you have to do that. Okay, you just have to kind of play the game. This is the game, right? So I know some sellers are in a rush to sell, but so we'll do that. We'll say, okay, we'll take it. If you can't get any more, you can't get any more. We'll try to get. What I do is I am so vocal about what I'm doing throughout that entire conditional period. So let's say they've given you 3 weeks. I'm just going to throw it out there. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, you're going and getting your inspection done. You have your appraisal being done. You're maybe going to get your ESA done and whatever. I'm telling them what I'm doing the whole entire time. I'm communicating. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I got this back and I got this. I'm over communicating at this point. They know they've heard from me and they know I'm doing something. So when the time comes, a week or two, or so before, I will say, I might need a little bit more time here because I still need this other report to come back. Is that okay? And I've gained this relationship now. They know that we've talked like a million times at this point. So the likelihood for them to like me and say, yes, you know what, I'll give you another week or two. Fine, Carina, I'll do that for you. It's more likely to happen. But what happens usually most of the time, people will put a property under conditions and only verbalize something the day or two before the conditions need to be removed. There's a whole different story. So again, long-term game, think long-term, whatever that you in everything that you're doing.
These are such fantastic tips, Carina. I'm totally going to make sure that that becomes part of my plan as well. I love that.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm just thinking here. Okay, can we do rapid fire?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, what is an EMD, so exempt market dealer? What are their responsibilities if a land development deal goes sideways? Do you know that? you're not an EMD, so do
I
you have
am
an
not an
idea or?
EMD. I know they do some analysis to figure out every lender fits the criteria, but again, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really. Sorry, it's not my expertise.
Yeah, no, and that's completely fair. Should we try a smaller project such as a fourplex before a bigger project, even when the numbers aren't great? Let's say it's just a break even. I know what I would say as a coach. I'd like to hear what you will say.
I say no. If you're just breaking even, consider that you're going to be in the negative because every single project always takes more money than you ever expected and
Yep.
more time. So if you're just breaking even, it's not worth your time. Again, you have to buy it right from the beginning and making sure that you underwrite it correctly, but you have to be extremely conservative in your numbers. And even if you're making a profit, great. At your highest, most conservative underwriting, if you're making a profit, then I think you're okay. But if you're running numbers and you're just right there, I don't think it's worth it because you'd probably be in the negative for some time.
Gotcha. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Are you open to reviewing a prospective development plan and being a consultant for someone?
Sometimes we are. So CDV, we do take on our own projects. So we work on our own projects, and that's our bread and butter. We do occasionally partner into other developments, or come in as an advisor. As you guys know, I am a mentor. I'm a coach, so I do come in as an advisory role in that respect. So feel free to link me up, connect with me, and then we can always look at it.
Love that. Okay, fantastic. And then the final one, there's a couple of others here that unfortunately we won't have time for, but what types of questions do you ask new partners to make sure they are a good fit?
Mm, that's a big one. So obviously their level of experience, and there's different types of partners here, right? I don't know which kind you're looking to have a conversation about, but there could be a capital partner, they could be a builder partner, they could be a developer partner, whatever the case. We have multiple different types of partners. There's even landowner partners that we come on board with, and there's so many different types of partners, but essentially just understanding their long-term game I think is really big for me. As you guys have noticed, I'm a long-term kind of individual, so when I see that there's the potential for more long-term, and they have that interest just as much as I do, that at least gets the ball rolling. If it's somebody that's just looking for a one-off or just a little bit of help here and there, it might not be the right partnership for me. So just whatever it is that your goals are, the partner's goals should be pretty aligned to those similar goals. And that's really like that win-win situation. If it's, let's say, a partner that has some other skill set that I don't have, like a builder, for example, it has to be a builder that has that level of expertise, something that I do not have internally to my company. Because obviously I see this a lot too, Elizabeth, which I never really quite understand, is people partnering, but they both don't have the experience. And I'm like, I don't really understand that kind of partnership, because to me a partnership should be that each individual has something of excellence that they bring in to the
Mhm.
partnership. And so those are the best kinds of partnerships, is where people have something and then put together that makes like a dream team. That to me is like the greatest kind of partnership. So figuring those things out for partnerships are key.
Yeah, I love that. I think another piece too that I always add for mine is making sure that the risk tolerance aligns. You know, not everyone is cut out for land development. So, um, you know, it's important to understand what is their capacity to tolerate risk and what are they looking to accomplish with their investments. I work quite often with people, with my coaching clients, where we spend some time building a vision for what does their portfolio look like, how much risk are they comfortable taking, what can become part of their portfolio. And for some people, land development, because it requires that long-term thing, and typically there is not a lot of cash flow in the beginning, it's not the right fit for them. That is okay. That is absolutely okay. And, I'm happy to refer people to Carina when they're saying, no, I'm looking for more aggressive growth. I'm willing to park my money for 5 to 10 years because I understand that, timelines may get extended and things may happen. And as long as you're comfortable with that and you understand the risks, then there shouldn't be any, surprises or anything unforeseen that's happening. I find the quality of the conversations you have at the beginning of the partnership are very reflective of the type of experience that you and your partner will have throughout the term. If you can talk easily and honestly and you communicate well and both parties are listening, then you're probably going to have a great partnership and a great relationship. But if one person's talking over the other, people aren't listening, people aren't understanding, people aren't caring, that can be an indicator. Even if the number that you get might look good, it's not going to make sense for you. It's not going to be a relationship that feels easy and feels comfortable and where you feel valued and trusted. So it's important to make sure there's a lot of alignment from that perspective.
Love it. I agree with you a lot on that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carina. You are absolutely fabulous. I think everyone can see why I think you are so amazing and you bring so much integrity and so much experience and information. We really appreciate you. If you're interested in exploring a little more about how to build a program to work with investors or how to screen and look at potential partners, by all means, reach out, book a discovery call with me. I'd love to chat about what you've got going on. If you are interested in exploring land development more, then make sure you're registering for Carina's class and give her a follow on Instagram. Carina posts some really cool stuff on there, some great little informational videos. And Carina, the 3 questions that we didn't get a chance to finish, I grabbed a screenshot of them. So I'm happy to share that with you. And maybe that's something that you and your team could put up a little video or do a post to answer people's questions.
Oh, awesome. I like that. Thank you so much,
Wonderful.
Elizabeth. This was so much fun. And thanks for everybody being so involved. I love this participation, communication going on. And thank you for taking the time to be here with us. This is awesome.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you. My next webinar is coming up in November, and we're going to be focusing on some really cool investment models. We're going to be talking about boutique hotels and other ways to use executive rentals, short and midterm rentals to drive cash flow into your portfolio. So stay tuned to your emails for that to come out. The recording of today's session will also be shared with you via email before the end of the week. Carina, thank you for being a wealth of information. Thank you to everyone for attending. We will see you again in November. Happy Halloween.
Guys, happy Halloween. Bye.
Bye, everyone.